Hello, and welcome to the briefing room. I'm Guntur Sutiyono, and I'm the country lead for Climateworks Center based in Jakarta. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some groundbreaking work that Climateworks Center has been doing in the role that ocean-based mitigation can play in decarbonization, both to meet climate commitments and to help reduce emission at the scale we need for a safe climate future. But first, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the lands where our Climateworks office is located and where several of our panelists are based, as well as our production team. We have a very large Australian audience for this briefing room, and I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and water where you are across Australia, and extend this to any elders or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who might be with us today for this event. Please feel free to use the chat to tell us what country you are dialing in from. And so today we are talking about ocean-based mitigation. Ocean-based mitigation, ocean-based climate mitigation is the reduction of emission from ocean-related activities such as seagrass to absorb emissions, offshore wind to reduce fossil fuel emissions, better practice in shipping or marine transport, more sustainable fisheries practice, and many others. These could provide up to 1/4 of the emission reductions needed to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And Indonesia is one of the most important countries in the world for ocean-based mitigation, with more than 17,000 islands and 99,000 kilometers of coastline. So today, we are presenting new analysis which maps where and how Indonesia can use blue carbon, offshore renewables, and maritime transport to become a world leader in ocean-based decarbonization. And to do that, I am delighted to be talking with some of the top experts in the field. Over the next hour, you will hear from Dr. Sali Bache, who will outline recommendations from our work in this area and how it fits with the international ocean climate context. Minalee Busi, who will highlight key findings from our collation of data on coastal and offshore mitigation options for Indonesia. And finally, I will chat with expert Professor Luky Adrianto about how we can use this data to create real change for climate commitments in Indonesia and also working with the right people. We will be taking your questions at the end, so please keep them coming through the Q&A section on your screen. So let's kick off with our first speaker. Dr. Sali Bache is the International Policy Lead at Climateworks with a focus on Asia-Pacific region. She works on policy analysis and development, as well as climate and blue carbon work in the region. She has 2 decades of experience in international governance, advising on resource conservation, taking part in international negotiations. She leads our SEAFOAM project, which stands for Southeast Asia Framework for Ocean Action in Mitigation. And Sali will tell more about the project. So Sali, over to you.
Thanks, Guntur. So we often speak about the climate as though it's an exclusively atmospheric phenomena, but even at a very basic level, we know that's not true. Imagine going for a swim at a beach here in Melbourne. Now imagine that same swim at a beach in Bali. Or compare surfing at Bells Beach to surfing in the Mentawais. Your body will very quickly tell you that the ocean indeed has a climate. The SEAFOAM project is the first step in a program to support Indonesia include ocean-based action as a core part of its climate policy. I would really like to acknowledge Quanta Edge Advancement Initiative and Mr. Philip Wang for the vision they have shown in the ongoing support they've given the SEAFOAM program. Climateworks and Monash University are both Australian-based organisations with an on-the-ground presence in Indonesia, and we have collaborated in this work with a range of Indonesian stakeholders and thought leaders in the ocean and climate area. Today, I'll outline the reason that the ocean is so vital to tackling climate change. I will then provide you some background to the SEAFOAM project. And finally, we'll discuss some of the key impacts that come from this work in Indonesia. We all know that the climate is changing. What less people realise is the important role that the ocean plays. The ocean absorbs both heat and carbon dioxide. In fact, an enormous 93% of human-generated heat goes into the ocean. This leads to sea level rise, where water warms and expands, causing the rise in ocean levels. It also contributes to deoxygenation, which in worst case creates dead zones in the ocean where nothing can survive. The ocean is also absorbing carbon dioxide or CO2. In fact, 30% of anthropogenic CO2 is absorbed by the ocean. Unlike in plants, however, the ocean's absorption of CO2 is not without significant impact, causing acidification, which sits along climate change as one of the 9 identified planetary tipping points. Given this context, it's easy to see why we paint the ocean as a victim of climate change. Several years ago, a report was commissioned by the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy that both Australia and Indonesia are founding members of. This report found that ocean-based mitigation action could make a substantial contribution to the climate solution. It revealed that more than 20% of the greenhouse gas mitigation that was needed to maintain global warming at 1.5 degrees could come from the ocean. In a way, this recast the ocean from victim to solution. It's a major mindset alteration, but understanding isn't enough. For advantage to be gained, actual action is needed. Up until recently, the climate change regime and the UNFCCC all but ignored the ocean. Several developments occurred in 2019, including the ocean receiving its first ever mention in the Climate Conference Output document after 25 years of climate talks. The same year saw a landmark report by the science-oriented Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The report was on the ocean and cryosphere, or the frozen bits of our planet, and together these have contributed to incremental changes. An ocean and climate change dialogue was established, which is now a permanent annual event. And last year, for the first time ever, the Climate Conference of Parties, or COP, directed countries to consider the inclusion of the ocean in their various national climate plans. And against this backdrop, we initiated the Seafoam project. Seafoam, or as Guntur said, the Southeast Asian Framework for Ocean Action in Mitigation, has revealed options across the areas of nature-based solution, alternative sources of energy, and reduced maritime emissions. We looked at the potential of blue carbon ecosystems to absorb and store carbon dioxide. We look at the application of offshore energy to either replace fossil fuels or to meet the growing energy needs of Indonesia. And we investigate reduced emissions through greener shipping, ports and maritime passenger transport. Both energy and transport are already considered in Indonesia's existing Enhanced Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC, which is a document in which a country pledges and reviews its commitment to greenhouse gas emission mitigation. However, the offshore does not currently feature as an element of either the energy or transport sectors in Indonesia's NDC. Given the significant mitigation potential, this is a lost opportunity for emissions reduction. Blue carbon's a little bit different. Blue carbon refers to mangroves, seagrasses and salt marshes and their enormous ability to absorb and store carbon dioxide, on average at 4 times the rate of terrestrial forests. Mangroves are included in Indonesia's existing NDC, however seagrasses are not, again leaving room for considerable gain from their conservation. So you might be wondering why we chose to do this work in Indonesia. The simple answer is that it was where we felt our work could have the greatest impact. Indonesia is a rapidly developing country with significant ocean personality, and it's also a major greenhouse gas emitter. Geographically, Indonesia is a country of islands. It is the largest archipelagic state in the world, and a significant portion of both its GDP and food are sourced from the ocean. Indeed, almost 2/3 of its population lives near the ocean. Indonesia also has a special ecological significance. It is home to the largest quantity of blue carbon ecosystems in the world, approximately 17%. And Indonesia values its maritime role, having played a major part in the negotiation of the Law of the Sea Convention. Early in his term, President Widodo released his global maritime fulcrum, positioning Indonesia once again as a maritime leader. And Indonesia has continued this leadership role through its G20 presidency and partnering with the World Economic Forum to establish O20, the O being for oceans, and now as chair of ASEAN, again showing leadership in its initiative to create an ASEAN plan for the sustainable blue economy, including in it climate, an action which sits alongside Indonesia's national agenda in this same area. Recognising Indonesia's commitment to the ocean and the enormous impact the mitigation action can have in this area, CFOAM has begun the process of looking at how we can assist Indonesia in understanding and capitalising on the ocean's contribution to climate ambition. And now back to you, Guntur.
Thank you, Sali. Let's bring our second speaker, Minalee Busi. Minalee is a project officer in the ocean team, working to understand climate mitigation opportunities in the ocean climate nexus, such as offshore energy and blue carbon. She supports research and analysis for the Southeast Asia Framework for Ocean Action in Mitigation, or CFOAM, the project we are talking about today. So, Minalee, time is yours.
Thanks, Guntur. Thanks, Sali, for introducing the project and the significant role oceans play in climate action. It's great to be here to be able to share insights and findings from our research. I've been working with Sali and the team since last year, and it's great to be here to share our findings. I'll start by sharing with you research and findings on the emissions mitigation potential of oceans, starting with blue carbon ecosystems, then move to offshore renewable energy, and finally to mitigation opportunities in shipping and ferry services. As part of the research, we have assessed mangroves, seagrass ecosystems, seaweed farming, in addition to emissions impact from bottom trawling. For offshore energy, we have assessed tidal, wave, offshore wind, and ocean thermal energy conversion, or OTEC, and emissions reduction opportunities in domestic maritime passenger transport, domestic and international shipping, and ports. While I'll go through some of the research findings from these, a technical report that will be released later in the year will have detailed analysis for each of these subsectors. Throughout the presentation, I'll illustrate our research and mitigation opportunities using maps developed for the CFOAM project. Starting with blue carbon ecosystems, mangroves are important coastal ecosystems with a range of environmental and social benefits, including in climate adaptation and mitigation, which is what we have looked at. In addition to protection against storms and tsunamis for coastal regions, they're important long-term coastal carbon sinks. This is especially given mangroves have the capacity for higher carbon absorption than land ecosystems. Historic and ongoing deforestation and degradation means, unfortunately, they're also a source of emissions. If left unprotected, these ecosystems release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Around the world, mangrove ecosystems are receiving a fair amount of attention in terms of data collation and policy reforms. The Indonesian government has one of the most ambitious restoration targets. We intend for our research to contribute to the ongoing systematic conservation and restoration planning. You can see the extent of mangrove ecosystems in the green shading on the map. The lighter blue shaded provinces are regions where protected areas could be extended. Additionally, conservation efforts should be focused on sites with high carbon density and highest historical deforestation or degradation rates, since here there's a significant potential for immediate mitigation impact. Seagrasses are also key ecological and social assets in the context of climate change adaptation and mitigation. They have similar high capacity for carbon absorption as mangroves, in addition to long-term carbon storage and soil sediments of these ecosystems. The full extent of blue carbon from these ecosystems has yet to be considered as a source of emissions or a potential carbon sink in NDCs, which is true for all countries with significant seagrass ecosystems. Our project is seeking to fill some of this gap within Indonesia's national greenhouse gas accounting frameworks, climate ambition, and policy. Our research suggests, if you look at the light green shading, these are areas where current ground truthing and mapping efforts could be prioritized. We also assess priority areas for increased protection. Recognizing seagrass ecosystems in the next NDC could play a significant role in realizing the long-term climate mitigation potential of seagrass ecosystems for Indonesia. Similar to mangroves, the destruction and degradation of these meadows causes carbon stored in the biomass and soil sediments to be released into the ocean and subject to ocean atmospheric flux. This is in addition to the loss in carbon sequestration capability that undisturbed meadows could otherwise provide. And similar to mangroves, protection has a higher mitigation potential than restoration. Ongoing mapping efforts will be a key lead-up action to national greenhouse gas inventory accounting. Moving now to offshore renewable energy potential in Indonesia. Offshore wind globally is currently the most sustainable source of energy generation, accounting for the lowest comparative life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. Currently, offshore wind is not central to Indonesia's energy transformation plan. However, Indonesia's Blue Economy Development Framework recognizes offshore wind energy as one of the key emerging sectors. Offshore wind power has been growing progressively around the world. It is currently being widely deployed in regions with high wind resources, while countries with low wind resources have been overlooked. We analyzed the emissions reduction from offshore wind, both from small and large capacity wind turbines. For small capacity generation, a study analyzed the potential from offshore wind energy generation from 2.1 megawatt wind turbines. Indonesia's low average wind speed makes it suitable for further research into offshore low wind turbines. You can see on the map in the lighter purple shading, offshore regions of as many as 26 provinces could be harnessed for low capacity offshore wind generation. Although not currently commercially available, lower wind speed offshore turbines, if prioritized for development, have the potential to contribute significantly to emissions reduction for countries with offshore low wind speeds, such as Indonesia. The dark purple regions are locations with high wind speeds. Large capacity offshore wind turbines are already commercially available and could be deployed in West Java and South Sulawesi with high future annual energy demands. Ocean thermal energy conversion, or OTEC, is a technique that uses the temperature difference between cold deep sea water and warmer surface water as a heat engine to operate a low-pressure turbine to produce electricity. This technology is particularly suitable for tropical oceans, where the surface water temperature remains almost uniform throughout the year. OTEC is currently not being used on a commercial scale due to its high capital costs. However, several projects are currently planned in regions across the Asia Pacific and North America. The map shows data from a study that identified suitable locations for application of a 100 megawatt closed cycle OTEC system. OTEC is close to being economically viable in as many as 9 provinces. In addition to individual power plants, integrated energy systems have been explored, such as OTEC offshore solar ponds and OTEC-based energy systems for green fuel production. The potential for even further reduction in energy-related emissions is possible if this is factored into development and energy planning. So far, we have looked at low carbon and offshore energy. Now we'll look at emission reduction opportunities in shipping and transport. Domestic shipping is a key part of Indonesia's economy. Indonesia relies heavily on domestic shipping for the transport of goods between islands. However, there are data gaps and lack of access to data available in terms of inventory management for greenhouse gases from the sector, which limits data analysis and hence limited ability to assess decarbonization solutions. There are many options for decarbonization of this sector, however, including energy efficiency improvements and a transition to low emissions fuel and energy sources. Our work and the work of others shows there is significant scope for energy efficiency improvement in the Indonesian domestic shipping fleet. Specific policy which pursues low-emitting fuels that are compatible with existing engines or modified engines should be explored to ensure that outcomes such as reduction in the life of vessels or increased total emissions due to inefficient operation of vessels is avoided. And finally, a map here that shows the mitigation potential of ferry transport. To identify decarbonization opportunities in maritime transport, we mapped the number of voyages and passengers carried on major domestic maritime routes. our analysis indicates current ferry routes suitable for electrification. Of the 10 most used ferry routes in Indonesia that carried 74% of all ferry passengers in 2021, 8 are suitable for electrification. For example, if the ferry between Java and Bali, the larger green circle on the map, could be electrified, this could significantly reduce emissions from transport of 6.2 million passengers each year. Electrification is the most promising solution for vessels operating on routes that regularly call at a port. The electrification of ferries is a mature technology and is operational in a number of countries, including in Southeast Asia, where significant developments have occurred in passenger vessel electrification. A detailed inventory of greenhouse gas emissions from this sector would further enable identification of high-impact areas for decarbonisation solutions. There's a significant mitigation gap between Indonesia's transition scenario, which is the extended conditional commitment, and its current Paris-aligned low-carbon compatible scenario as outlined in its NDC. Ocean-based mitigation can meet half of this annual mitigation gap by 2050, which shows the significant role ocean-based mitigation measures can play in climate mitigation. This is just a snapshot of our CFOM findings. We look forward to sharing more with you in a month or two. Thanks, Guntur.
Thank you very much, Minalee. If you have just joined us, welcome to Climateworks Center's briefing room, where we are talking about the potential for climate-based mitigation in Indonesia and a project that we are working on to do just that. I'm Guntur Sutiyono, and I'm the Indonesia Lead for Climateworks Center. We have just heard from Minalee Busi on how our latest project is mapping the opportunities for ocean mitigation in Indonesia, and from Sali Bache on how this fits in an international policy context. Our project works with a group of experts from reputable universities, think tanks, and governments who advise us under a steering group. And I'm delighted to introduce a member of that team who helps us bring all the work together with government and non-government actors to support the update to Indonesia's national determined contributions. And having the data alone is not enough, so we need to understand the climate commitments process and challenges associated with long-term climate strategies and the governance needed to support it. So to delve into this, I'd like to welcome Professor Luky Adrianto, an esteemed figure in fisheries, science, and policy development in Indonesia and the region. So Pak Luky has worked in coastal and marine resources management for more than 20 years. He has led research, education, and policy initiatives in Indonesia and internationally, and is widely published in both English and Bahasa Indonesia. We are lucky enough to have him as the chair of the Indonesian Stakeholder Steering Committee for our CFOM project, and of course to have him here today. So welcome, Pak Luky. Pak Luky, I have a couple of questions for you first, and perhaps to give a context, Indonesia is currently updating its NDC. Could you tell us briefly about it? And so what is new this time?
Okay, thank you, Mas Guntur. Welcome to the brief rooms on the context of Indonesian policies related to the, especially in the ocean inclusion in the next NDC. I think as the largest archipelagic states, Indonesia has more engagement on how to respond to the importance of the ocean in the context of the climate, especially when we established the National Act number 694 related to the ratification of UNFCCC, including oceans aspect on that National Act. In that regards, I think Indonesia also part of the international as well as national nexus related to the ocean and climate working groups, because actually the ocean, as I mentioned, the largest actually state that ocean is more dominating our geographical area than the terrestrial, and we also involved in the context of the ocean and climate change dialogue, for example, start from the COP27 until last 27 in Egypt. In the context of the national 30-minute NDC contribution of our Indonesia related to the ocean, I think what the Sali and Minalee's presentation is very important for us because right now, as in our government process, our target of inclusion of the ocean is actually around 2024, 25 after the engagement of the next NDC or the enhanced NDC 2022 that we already start with the mangrove as the blue carbon ecosystem included in the follow related to the last enhanced NDC 2022. But then, as we know that the under the ocean and climate change, we have two parts of the blue carbon ecosystem as the carbon related ecosystem, as absorption and something like that, and also the context of the next. The second one is the low emission development strategy, especially with the context of the coastal and marine. And what actually Minalee just presented to us actually we have two sides of the carbon related ecosystem, blue carbon ecosystem, as well as the related to the low emission strategies, OTEC and ocean-based energy and something like that. And based on that, right now, Indonesia is still focusing on the blue carbon ecosystem first. So as I mentioned, actually the mangrove, seagrass is part of that. IPCC mentioned the tidal marsh, part of the blue carbon. But then the position of the Indonesia right now is just to still engage on the seagrass profiling, seagrass measurement, reporting, and verification mechanism and methodology related to the context of the seagrass, and also the how to transfer all of this to the carbon pricing strategy. So this profile is part of the important step of the seagrass as the part of the blue carbon ecosystem. And the next activity that I think we can part of the inclusion of the ocean is actually by 2023, as I mentioned, seagrass profiling. Mangrove already been written in the enhanced NDC, but still under the above biomass, above ground biomass. But then 2023 until 2024 and 2025, we also would like to include the mangrove below ground biomass, and then part of that also with the seagrass profiling, seagrass biomass above or below carbon absorption or stocks, and then 2024 will be taken on the context of the simulation of the target of emission reduction, especially with the context of seagrass, because seagrass is still lag behind the mangrove ecosystem initiative related to the blue carbon. And according to the government, with the discussion with the, especially the Ministry of Environment and Forestry as the leading institution for the climate change, and then the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries as the responsible authority of the blue carbon ecosystem, the target of the ocean inclusion should be in the 2025, but perhaps still in the first aspect of blue carbon or ocean and climate relatively blue carbon. The lead is still behind of that, still until 2030, but then less than 2060, or perhaps in our golden age of Indonesia 2045, then the low emission development strategy will be taking part in the context of the ocean and climate. But the focus of government right now is still on the blue carbon ecosystem inclusion related with the ocean and climate. I think that's the situation of the government policies. Back to you, Mas Guntur.
Thank you, Pa. So I think I take from your explanation, there's still quite a lot of work, enormous work to be done up to 2025, and we will need a lot of support from people like yourselves and other non-state actors. So my question is, taking into account those other work, seagrass profiling, mangrove below ground, carbon accounting, simulation, etc. What other support do you think is needed from this point up to 2025? And how do you think Seafoam or other projects can contribute to that process?
Yes, of course. I think Seafoam can contribute in the two things. Yeah, the first actually related to the institutional aspect of the climate. and the ocean. I know that the ocean and climate dialogue in the context of national dialogue of the ocean and climate is still needed to be strengthened, since that actually the several institutions under the government authority still have some discussion under that. For example, like the rules of the Ministry of Environmental and Forestry as the leaders of the climate change adaptation and mitigation and policy for our country, and then the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Affairs related to the context of the blue carbon and ocean climate policies. And then we also have like the Ministry of coordinating Ministry of Maritime and Investment as part of the how to connect with the all of the stakeholders, institutional stakeholders related to this ocean, because maritime is not only fisheries but also the another aspect of the maritime that, as Minalee mentioned, related to the technology, transportation. Sea transportation is part of the context of how to reduce the carbon. For example, the need actually the role of the coordinating Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Investment, as well as the Bappenas and the National Development Agency Ministry of planning of the, let's say, Lead. Yeah, for example, blue carbon, low emission strategy or development plan should be also discussed with the context of the Bappenas. In that context, CFOM can facilitate what we call the ocean and climate dialogue within the national context, not only within the government authority, but also with the academics, the business players, and also with the civil society related with CSO and other, say, coastal community or island community. That actually climate is part of the, even though that actually sometimes we ignore that role, but actually the local community, local island community, coastal communities has a very important roles, especially in the context of the adaptation as well as the mitigation of the ocean and climate. I think that's the first thing. And the second one is CFOM also part, as already been presented by Minalee, for example. We also have some like the scientific collaboration between those two countries like Australia and Indonesia with the universities platform or with the CSO platform or with the other stakeholder, multi-stakeholder platform, for example, to get some of the scientific collaboration related to the how to deal, because the largest ocean area of country, we need more than one or two institution or even expert group. For example, we need a contribution from the other partner, as well as actually the partners follow what actually the national government policies, national government management measures related to the ocean policy. So I think these two types of the contribution that CFOM can do, Mas Guntur, the institutional policy dialogue, and then the scientific collaboration. Back to you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak. I think we will pause there for a moment, and I would like to invite other panels and to turn the camera on, and we would like to move to audience questions and bring all our speakers into this panel discussion. So I'll start with the questions sent in ahead of the event today, and this is for Sali. So very keen to hear the opportunities for sustainable coastal development combined with both adaptation and mitigation action.
Thanks for the question, Guntur. I guess the first thing I'd say is that adaptation and mitigation in the coastal setting are often almost indivisible, and the blue carbon ecosystems both sequester carbon but also provide a significant buffer to storm surge and other climate-related events. So these key ecosystems can have a role in sustainable development and support a range of livelihoods as well, such as fisheries. Combining, that sustainable development question with that adaptation and mitigation action. Tourism is probably another good example where you have avenues for the generation of income by coastal communities, but people on a holiday want a healthy marine ecosystem. So protection and conservation and regeneration, which creates that healthy ecosystem that people want to go and see, provides economic activities as well as sequestering carbon dioxide. I think the other element to this question that's really interesting is something that we've seen in recent years, which is the emergence of a green-grey community of practice and the concept of green-grey infrastructure. So that's where we prioritise nature as a solution, but also rely on technology where we need it. An example is the protection of coastal assets and communities through the planting of mangroves as well as using traditional engineering, like things in sea walls. Another area might be where you place wind farms, but you have artificial reefs underneath that might create, lively areas for ecosystem regeneration. Yeah, thanks, Guntur.
Thank you. I'm going to look back, Minalee, here. So, Minalee, are there any areas that aren't included in your calculations that might have a substantial impact in the coastal area?
Thanks for the question, Guntur. So, as I mentioned, as part of our analysis, we also looked at emissions impact from bottom trawling. So, bottom trawling is a harmful fishery practice that drags netted fishing nets across the bottom of the sea to catch seafood, and that disturbs the seabed, and that releases the carbon that is stored in the seabed. And research has shown that around 54 tons of carbon dioxide is released for every ton of fish caught by bottom trawling practices. And annually, that comes around 100 million tons of carbon dioxide released, and that's a significant number in terms of the emissions impact that harmful fishery practices such as bottom trawling can have. But there are significant data gaps in this area, and that's why they're not currently included in our calculations, but we do have the analysis done in this area.
Thank you. Luky, we have a question. I think you also mentioned, seagrass earlier as part of the effort to be included in the NDC, and there's already ongoing inclusion for the mangrove. And I think one of the interesting question is, what is the difference in terms of the scale, the carbon sequestration between seagrass and mangrove restorations in Indonesia? And if you have, maybe you come across that numbers or illustration from your previous work. Yeah.
Well, yes. Basically, now we're working on that to look ecosystem, mangrove and seagrass, and mangroves already been some advanced stage on compared to seagrass. And the second one, actually, now the government also doing some restoration, especially still in the mangrove. That's why that actually the importance of the mangrove is very considered as in Indonesian policy. They changed the restoration agency from the just only peatland restoration agency and put mangrove as part of the restoration. That's clear that mangrove is very important. But then we have a seagrass. Seagrass is also part of the very important blue ecosystem in the country. And related to the context of the restoration scale, I can say that mangroves are still advanced, but we need more for the seagrass actually, because actually the mangrove and seagrass, even though many of the papers said that actually the mangrove has more rate or emission factor, for example, related to seagrass. But I think in the context of the Indonesian perspective, seagrass and mangrove is very important. Related to the anthropogenic threats, actually is very important to be reduced, because seagrass is very vulnerable ecosystem compared to context mangrove, because seagrass is like just today we have seagrass and then tomorrow we can lose the seagrass, because the seagrass just like it's very easy to to evacuate something like for the resident from the context of the settlement, something like that. So I think from the context of the carbon importance for the ecosystem, two of blue ecosystem is very important. But then the scale of restoration should be more balanced related to the context of mangrove and seagrass. That's why this year we focused on the seagrass profiling. We focused on the seagrass measurement, verification, how to report, and also in this moment I would like to also answer the QA from players. Therefore, for some like how the community can involve. Yes, the KKP, the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Affairs, established the control room for the seagrass or the blue carbon ecosystem. So any institution, any community have some say reporting on the contact of the seagrass in the front of the homes in the coastal area. They can just put in the contact of the control room. They can send the information, of course, with the contact of the assistance by the local university or assistance by the local CSO, and that's very open. So the control room under the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Environment is very inclusive. That's why actually we start with the contact of mechanism, monitoring system, because still lag behind compared with the compared to the mangrove. So we need that effort related to that seagrass, especially with the contact of seagrass. Pak Guntur. So because this is not technical words that dialogue, I just think that seagrass should be more in balance related to the affirmative policy for the next future. Of course, mangrove still ongoing process as I explained before. Back to you, Pak Guntur.
Yeah, I'm aware that there's currently quite a lot of efforts in mapping seagrass, and I can ask you a bit to illustrate how far are we from completing nationwide map. But also want to highlight that there's what I get from you is there's a big governance issue or governance question on how we manage that information. So maybe coming back to you, but give us an illustration of how much left the current work on mapping the seagrass.
Well, compared to mangrove, for example, like mangrove 1 to 10, mangrove is almost 8 or 9. Then the seagrass is still maybe 5 or 6, because in our recent works in the context profiling the seagrass, based on the agreement of the seagrass scientists, seagrass communities, we have like quote unquote potential a map of 3 million hectares. But then we agree for the sample, for the context of the carbon estimation, we agree to the start with the 1.6 something million hectares, and then that's why that Minalee's work will be very important to as the complementary data for us to start with the baseline of the seagrass related to the carbon and climate policy for the context of the next NDC. And 2025 is very near from now, Pak Guntur. That's why actually we start with the context of profiling, sharing, and then we call actually multi-stage NDC. So because we like extended, enhanced, but we have to start with the inclusion of this blue carbon ocean sector, new sector for the context of the NDC. And the sector from the beginning actually just only the blue carbon sectors, and then we start with the other sector like energy. Maybe the ocean energy will be put in the energy sector, but maybe sea transportation will be put in the energy. But at least that's still on the context of the ocean marine policy, ocean scientists, ocean policy, still same group. So this way that we need, I mean, that aspect to your question before, CFOM can also contribute to the context of ocean climate dialogue within that context of ocean inclusion to the next NDC, the second NDC, something like that.
Okay, we have a couple of minutes left, but I still want to have maybe another 1 or 2 questions. But then, Sali, maybe quickly, there is a question around community-inspired frugal solutions for blue carbon circular economy that can be replicated. I know you're also working on other issues like marine plastic pollutions, etc. So if you could, briefly touch on if you have any experience or information on the, this kind of solutions.
Community-driven solutions are a key in a lot of areas, in particular in the plastics area. I think that very rarely do we recognise the really strong link between plastic pollution in the ocean and climate change, and it largely sits around an ocean health context. But plastic largely is created from petrochemical products, and a large portion of the breakdown of plastics in the ocean then impacts the ability of the ocean to reabsorb CO2 as it moves forward. So that focus on community action, certainly in the context of plastics that you mentioned, Guntur, is really, really important. There are a range of other areas where communities participate. There's a movement towards citizen science, but there also needs to be outreach from areas like us where we're doing the research to integrate with communities, to discuss with them why we're doing the work, to see what sort of impact and what sort of integration they want to have. So the opportunity is enormous. It's about getting the engagement coming from both sides and recognising where those opportunities sit. I'll be brief and pass back to you because I know we're short on time.
Yeah. Pak Luky, this is the last, and grateful if you could wrap quickly on this, but this is a very interesting question because Indonesia is also working and has issued regulations on carbon market and carbon pricing. So what is the relevance of these policies for the blue carbon and NDC update? Grateful if you can debrief, Pak Luky.
Yes. A lot of maybe 1 or 2 or 3 new regulations already established related with the carbon market, especially established by the Ministry of Forest and Environmental Affairs. And yes, soon we will open the carbon market, something like that. But especially for the context blue carbon, in our works we also in one chapter we develop actually the plans or the proposed agenda for the blue carbon pricing strategy. In that context, actually, I have to say with a very keywords that in the context of that, we and our groups, we proposed about the context of the total blue ecosystem service value. Instead of just only the carbon value, something like that. Because when seagrass, for example, just was that converted to the settlement, it's all of the fresh service is gone. It's not just only the carbon value. In that context, actually, the blue carbon pricing strategy in our concept, in our report, try to put the carbon is part of the total blue ecosystem service value. This is the first thing related to the market. The second one, it may be related to the pricing strategy. The second one is that the inclusivity, because the market should be represent the inclusivity, the benefit, the mutual benefit of that service value to all of the stakeholders, including the local community. As Sali mentioned, actually the local small island community that always care with the seagrass, for example, or mangrove in the coastal area should be put at the part of the market mechanisms. Cannot just only full market mechanism and then avoid the benefit of the service related to the local community. And that context, we need some of dialogue, Pak Guntur, related with the context of the market or private communities, scientists, the local communities, CSO, in the context of the systematic overview on the how carbon value, as I mentioned, part of the blue ecosystem service value should be considered in the context of market mechanism. Pak Guntur.
Thank you, Pak Luky. So that brings us to the end of our discussion. We will send through a recording from this session and keep you updated the latest news in climate solutions. Please sign up to the Climateworks newsletter on our website so that you receive notifications about our next events. I would like to thank our panel and guests, Sali Bache, Minalee Busi, and Pak Luky Adrianto, our production team behind the scenes, and to our audience who joined us from different countries, Australia, Indonesia, Singapore, and other countries. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much for your question, and see you again in the next briefing room.